Hi, I'd just like to demonstrate in this video tutorial how I take a drawing done by hand, or at least sketched. This one was sketched on the computer, but sort of drawing with traditional pencil type tools, and turn that into an Illustrator document, so something that looks more like this. So nice clean lines. You'll see if I just zoom in here. Some dotted lines indicating that this object is passing behind another, some varied line weight, a bunch of objects that have to be organized um, in terms of their layers so they sit on top of each other properly. But I went through this process already, and I documented it on a video, so what I'll do is just play that video back at 3 times its normal speed, and then I'll just talk over it and maybe stop from time to time to address any certain issues that I wanted to point out to you. Okay, so I'll just play this. So just like usual, starting a new document, naming it, and I'm using the print letter size preview. Now just setting up a few things, moving my palettes and toolbars around so I can access them easily. Now I'm just placing that first image, so it's under File, Place, and then I'm labeling that layer that it's on, and I dim the image to 50%. Now I've put it on its own layer and put another layer on top where I'm going to start drawing with the pen tool. So what I've decided to do here is to draw the thumb, and you can see there's a line where the thumb connects to the rest of the hand, but I'm going to cover that up later with a mask. The reason I'm doing it this way is because it's easier to have the thumb sitting on top of the chopsticks. Oh, by the way, the image is just an illustration of somebody holding chopsticks, I guess Japanese style. So why I'm illustrating that? No particular reason. I might be hungry. But anyway, so I'm doing the separate fingers, each finger separately on its own layer. So you can see I'm creating a new layer each time I start a new finger, labeling it as I go. And for this one, the middle finger, we only see a little part of it, so where it goes underneath the index finger, I'm not worrying too much about how the path looks or anything like that. The other thing you'll notice is that I'm working with if you look down here in the toolbar, no fill, but with a black stroke. That way I can see the drawing underneath, and the white fill doesn't get in the way. So you can see the fill has got a little red line through it. So I'm making new layers for all these things. So now I'm down to the pinky, and I'm actually using this same layer to draw the sort of the heel of the hand to the back part of the hand. Now there's no perfect or exactly right way to do this. One thing, let me just go back here in the video a little bit. If you just look over here for a second, you can see that I've got my layer open, and each layer consists of a number of sub-layers, or it could just be one. But on the same layer, the one I named, well, I named it rig finger, but ring finger, I've drawn two paths. One is the pinky, and then I'm drawing something else. So I can organize these whichever way I want. One may need to go on top of the other. So you may just see there, I just decided that in fact I didn't want those two elements. I drew the pinky on the ring finger layer by accident. So what I did to correct that was I created a new layer, and then the subpath, or the sublayer that I wanted, you see all the layers and sublayers have these little circles beside them. If you click on that, it selects everything on that layer or sublayer. And when you have something selected, there's a little colored box beside that circle, and then all I did was click and drag it up to the new layer. I'll just play that. So I select that, and I clicked and dragged it up to the new layer, so it moved that object onto the new layer, and I named that pinky and far palm. So I'm just reorganizing my layers here. So the index is on top, the thumb is on top of that, then it goes down to the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky finger. So they have to be organized properly, and you can see when I give them a white fill, that they occlude each other as they should, so that the things on top are hiding the things below. And so I'm doing this other layer here that is going to be the sort of part of the hand that is closest to us, the front of the wrist I called it, or something like that. Now I'm making some line masks, but you can see here, let me just stop this line. By doing it this way, I've got these lines here that shouldn't be there, and to solve that I'm just making a layer with white objects with no stroke. And you can see I'm using, this is the shape tool, and I'm just selecting, what did I select? Probably an ellipse, which is just a squashed circle, and then I'm going to use the white direction tool, direct select tool, to change their shape to cover this up properly. So you can see when I first created it, it had a stroke around it. You can see that down here in the toolbar, it's got a white fill and a black stroke. And to correct that, I select the stroke and then just click this little red line item, and that will just take away the stroke, the line around it. So you can see the other thing I did there, when I want to make sure I'm not selecting anything underneath this object, I locked all the other layers. So you want to pay attention to the layer that you're working on, and if you don't want to inadvertently manipulate anything on the other layers, just lock them temporarily. There, I just hid the sketch for a second so I can see my drawing without the sketch behind it. So you can see how it stands up on its own. I'm making another line mask there, making some adjustments to one of the lines. Nope. I've got the sketch back up because I'm making the hashi, or the chopsticks now. So let me just jump back here. I use the shape tool again. This one here. So I just clicked on the rectangle shape, and it allows me to draw a rectangle shape and drag it into the long, narrow shape that I want. Name that layer and then move it into position. Now, using the black arrow, you can go near the corner of an object, and when the icon changes to a little bendy arrow, you can rotate it, and that's what I did here. There's another rotation tool here that gives you a little more control, and what it allows you to do when you use the rotation tool, it puts the pivot point right in the middle of the object, but you can just click on that and drag it, and I put the pivot point towards the end of the object, so when I rotate it, it rotates around the end of the object rather than the middle. So just using that to place it properly. Now I know it's sitting over the fingers right now, but I'm not worried about that right now because I know I can rearrange it. Now I just duplicated that, by selecting it with a black arrow, holding down the Option key, and clicking and dragging it, and that will duplicate it. So rather than making it from scratch, I can just do it that way. Now doing the same thing, placing it using the rotation tool to get it roughly into the position that I want. I'm paying attention to the fact that it should be pressed up against the middle finger here. Making them a little longer, just using the black arrow to pull out their bounding box. I'm just rearranging the layers to make sure everything is okay. Now I'm trying to figure out how I can make the hashi sit underneath the thumb, but over top of those line masks. And the thing that I've chosen to do here is to make a new layer and duplicate both the thumb and both of the chopsticks onto that layer. And I can duplicate something. Let me just go into Illustrator here for a second. I have to unlock my layers. Say I select this object here, and you can see now it's selected here on the layer. Say I create a new layer, and I want to duplicate this object. If I want to just move this thing to a new layer, this object here, then I can just click on this square and drag it onto that layer, and it takes it from one layer and puts it onto another. But if I want to duplicate it, I can hold down Option and then click and drag the little square. Now it exists on both layers. So I did that with two things. I selected the thumb and the hashi, and then I made a layer that had both of those things on it. So it's going to undo because I don't need that. So I've got everything. Oops, I skipped a step. Now this is getting to a sort of advanced technique here. But I'm using something called the Pathfinder. So I'm putting all the elements I need to a separate layer. Then I'm going into the window menu and I'm going to choose this thing called the Pathfinder. And it's this option box that allows you to, if you select a whole bunch of objects that are overlapping, you can use them to cut out pieces from each other. And I'm selecting the one here on the very end, and that just, if you have a whole bunch of overlapping objects, just wherever they overlap, they cut each other and you get a whole bunch of separate pieces. And then I have to go to Object. They're all grouped together, you can see in the sublayers. Select the group and then go to Object, Ungroup. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so Object, Ungroup here. And then there are all a bunch of separate objects I can select on their own. I can delete the ones I don't want. And you can see I'm selecting them from the layer set by clicking on the little circles. And the ones I'm trying to get separately are these ones that fall underneath the thumb. What I want to do with those is turn them into dotted lines and then put them on top of the thumb. So you can see what I've done here. I've selected the object, the little thing that sits under the thumb, the part of the hashi that goes behind the thumb. And in the stroke menu, there's a little option down here that says dashed line. Turn that on, and then I typed in the number 5. And so that means each dash is going to be 5 points. A point is 1/72 of an inch, and then each gap between them will also be 5 points. You can't see them yet because I have to move them on top. And there I've moved them on top onto their own layer, so they sit on top of the thumb. Then I'm deleting all the other pieces that got cut out when I did that Pathfinder thing and just getting rid of them. Now I think these are 12-point dash lines. I go in later and fix them, I think. So again, I'm opening up the layer to look at the sub-layers here to find the things that I need. Now I'm confused, I'm not sure what to do, and then I decide the problem that I had here, if you can see, is that the dash lines go all the way around, so you get dash lines here too, which kind of overlapping with the underlying thumb. And I don't really need to see that, so what I've decided to do is duplicate the thumb and then put it on a layer over top of these dashed lines and give it a black a black stroke and no fill, so it just covers up that part. So just sort of guerrilla tactics to make it work. So here I am duplicating it onto a new layer, giving it no fill with a black stroke, and you see it solves that problem for me. Now this will be totally transparent and it's not obvious to the viewer of the final illustration, but you can use these little tricks to hide things. So you can see now that I've got to move my layer masks or my line masks up over top of that thumb and then readjust them a little bit so they match. They have to be on top of the thumb outline but below this hashi part of the chopstick. So now just doing a lot of rearranging of layers and sub-layers to make sure the appropriate things are covering the things that need to be covered, and so on. Changing my dashed weight lines, and I'm doing, I think, 3-point dashes and spaces because I think it looks better. Now I have to do the same thing with this index finger. Oh, I'm labeling my layers. So this index finger and this chopstick has to go underneath. So I have to do the same thing, select both of them, duplicate them onto a new layer, and then I'm going to use the Pathfinder again over here, do the intersection tool, and And then I can ungroup them, look at the sub layers, delete all the things I don't need. That's what I'm doing now, selecting and deleting. And the one that has to be dotted, making it dotted. Duplicating the index finger, putting it over top of the dashed line, and then giving it a stroke with no fill just to cover up the edge pieces. And saving, because I haven't saved for a while, which was foolish of me. Now I'm just taking a look at it, thinking about how I can give the outline maybe slightly thicker stroke, moving things around just to make sure, whoops, everything is working as it should. So now I've selected that thumb layer. I'm increasing the stroke to 2, stroke weight. The wrist I'm increasing to 2 because they're sitting on top, so I want to bring those things forward. Now that I've changed the stroke weight, I've got to change those layer masks a little bit. Sorry, those line masks I made. Now I've got that funny part where these two strokes meet. I'm going to hide that change because I want it to be thicker here and thinner here. So now I'm changing that to 1.5, the stroke of the index finger. Then I'm just moving that little piece behind the chopstick here so you don't see that transition. So I'm fudging a lot of stuff, but whatever it takes to make it work. So there's some other funny stuff going on here. Now I'm giving the hashi sort of intermediate line, the chopsticks an intermediate line weight too. So the background lines I made 1 point, then the hashi or the chopsticks are 1.5, I think, and then this silhouette profile in front of us is 2. Now it doesn't really match what we were talking about with our drawings, where the external profile, the silhouette profile, which would include this part here, should always be the thickest. I could have done it that way, but I really wanted to bring this part forward and push this part back, so I didn't want to put them on the same visual level. So I used a different stroke weight to push them back. Now I'm just drawing the nails in. Just detailed, it gives us an idea of the orientation of the fingers and tells us what's on top of what. So there you go. That took about half an hour to do, thinking through the process. Oop, forgot the thumbnail. Gotta put that on. Just adjusting. And now don't forget that when you draw something, don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. You can use the direct select tool, the white arrow, to go in and change things around. So that's finished. So that's kind of an overview of all the thinking that goes on when you're doing one of these things. There's a lot of moving around and organizing. You can see I'm working on lots of layers because I have to put some things on top of others so they can block the other things out. I've got fake objects hidden in here that are hiding some lines. But you can see what we wind up with is a nice clean drawing that uses a lot of layers of information. The thumb sitting on top of the hashi, the chopsticks, right? Then the different fingers organized one on top of each other, the dotted lines to indicate the chopsticks and where they are behind the fingers. I was always careful as I was working to keep labeling my layers because you can see that even though there's a little preview of what the layers look like or what's on the layers, that it's easy to get lost. So every time you make a layer and put something new on it, label it. You'll save yourself a lot of grief. There are a few other things that I want to show you, but I'll demonstrate those in another tutorial. So take time to review this sort of stuff. It'll help you a lot when you go to finalize your illustrations for your first assignment. Thanks.